Hey guys, this is Tauna. Today we're going to be talking about the playtest cards from the Mystery Booster Set 2 and why you should potentially care about them despite the fact that they are kind of just memey. Essentially, these are potential looks into the future. With the previous, Mystery Booster 1, we had a whole bunch of them come out, and then some of them end up actually becoming real cards or kind of hinting at things for the future. Stuff like, Cleave, for example, or keyword counters ended up coming from, this recycler bird here. We've got mill being a keyword was first shown here in a test card and then became a real card. The hound errata to dogs, where all hounds ended up becoming dogs later on. Token copies of real cards, so like domesticated mammoth here, creating a token copy of pacifism, ended up becoming, similar like Garth One Eye here. We've got this card here, which is essentially very, very similar, where you get to conjure 3 cards named this into your graveyard. We've got the caring about a bigger deck size. So like Witty Demon here cares about having a bigger deck size. Yorion did the same thing. Beholders existing. This card here, this Enchantmentize, is essentially the exact same thing, right? It is the exact same thing as one with the stars there, even down to the cost. Right, a very similar effect here between this Frogkin Kidnapper and the Elite Spellbinder, where you're essentially taxing a card within someone's hand. Copies of permanent cards. So originally, copies weren't able to come in as like tokens or anything like that. Now they can, and it's very similar, like, how anything that can copy creatures and stuff like that now. We've got Morph on non-creatures here with Elrond's Epiphany here. And then these are the new ones. So potentially some of these will end up becoming real mechanics, whether they're in the foreseeable future or, a couple years in the future or something. Eventually, we could see some of these cards becoming real cards, or at least the mechanics from them. So we've got Zone of Flame here. Now, I like this one. I find it very, very interesting. So it is, I'm not going to talk too much about the costs or anything like that, more about just like the uniqueness of the cards, right? So this one here is you enchant a zone. So you can enchant the battlefield, command zone, exile, or the stack. Those are all shared zones, or each player, you could enchant one person's graveyard, hand, or library with it. And it's very interesting here because whenever one or more cards enter or leave that zone, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Very, very interesting. We've got Glimpse the Unthinkable here. So this one has Shroud. He cannot be chosen, which is interesting. And as well as the name cannot be chosen. So that's very interesting for ones where, it's like choose a card from an opponent or choose a creature of an opponent's. Jundam out here creating token copies of cards or copies of cards. This is very interesting as well because of the fact that it is very similar to like the Garth One Eye kind of thing. So we could potentially see more kind of similar things to that. It's also interesting that we just got kind of like a erratory kind of thing where things like where you do copy Liliana of the Veil or something, and then it actually has the mana cost of that card too, with the most recent like Tarmogoyf and the Offspring as well. The Planewalker here has Planeswalker Walk, which is interesting because it means that it can't be blocked as long as the defending player controls a Planeswalker. So maybe they're going to expand out like, the walking and stuff. Maybe we'll see more of that, which is interesting. These ones, I actually love these ones, these Omen Paths. So this one here is Omen Path for Naya. So it's a tri-land that will come in, but it has vanishing. So it's kind of like a temporary land. It comes in untapped, obviously. You can use it for, 4 rounds, 5 rounds technically, because you can use it on the turn that it came out as well, right? Like, so turn 1, and then you remove 1, remove 1, remove 1, remove 1. So yeah, I think you'd be able to get 5 turns out of it. It's either 5 or 4 turns. I can't think of it at the moment. Either way, this would be very interesting as a kind of new land cycle. Chudsuk Mighty Guitarist here is a very interesting one because around kind of banding and stuff. And about buffing things up with banding. I assume that we can kind of discount this one as not going to come back. I doubt they're going to do banding again. No regrets. Egret here is a very interesting one as well, because anytime you mulligan, but you've got this in your hand, you can reveal it. And if you do, you get to look at the top 2 cards of your library. Very interesting. Creepy Crawler here. This is a mechanic that I would find very interesting to show up in like the upcoming Duskmourn effect, a Duskmourn set. So it is whenever you deal combat damage to a player who is afraid of you. So they are afraid of you if a horror, nightmare, enchantment, or face down creature you control entered the battlefield or attacked them this turn. A very interesting kind of grouping of different kinds of effects that you could potentially do here. Very, very interesting. We've got Nuzzle Spaceship, or Vuzzle Spaceship here. This is a very interesting one, and it could potentially show up in like the upcoming space set or something. Essentially, the +1/+1s kind of show the like hull integrity of the creature. So if you've got 6 +1/+1s on it, it has flying. If it's still got 3 left, when it attacks, it deals 1 damage to any target. So as it gets damage, you remove that many +1/+1 counters on it. So it kind of slowly kind of takes damage and gets weaker, but you could do some really cool stuff where, you know, you could buff up the amount of +1/+1s on it or something. Maybe, you know, it comes with Spaceship 6, but it's got like a Thrusters 12, which gives us first strike or something like that. So it's encouraging you to add more +1/+1s onto it. Flanking listed here, so this is a throwback to a original card from Marrow from memory. It has a red and tap it. It loses this ability and becomes a creature enchantment that reads Enchanted Creature gains flanking instead of a creature. So like essentially kind of bestows itself onto people. Yeah, that's essentially kind of bestow there. All right, we've got a Stone Drake here, which is an interesting one. It's kind of like a stormish kind of thing here. When it enters, a target player discards a card for each spell you've cast this turn. Dwarven Confluencer makes a mana confluence token, which is a land. So creating like land tokens that tap, pay 1 life, add 1 mana. You can also destroy your own lands, which would be interesting with that too. Fireball here with Cost Storm. When you cast this spell, copy it for each different mana value among other spells and lands you've played this turn. Terrypin Turbo Turtle. You may ignore the word activate only as a sorcery when activating abilities. Don't worry about it. Enchant card in your hand. That is very cool. So you play this, it enchants a card in your hand, and essentially when you play that card, it costs 1 less and you can copy it. It's very cool. I like it. I think it's a very interesting card. We've got Value Town here. So this is a land that enters tapped, but it has a adventure attached to it. So you can play that for draw 2 cards and then deals 2 damage to each opponent. And then you can play it as a land later from Exile. Luxior Ignited here is a legendary artifact Planeswalker. So you can attach this to a creature, and then it gets +1/+1 for each counter on Luxior Ignited. Very interesting card. I find that one really cool. So Ruined Terror here. Instead of taking turns as normal, players take their phases sequentially. So this is obviously a reference here to Legends of Runeterra, but it kind of changes up the game a lot, because it means that each person will take their, you know, beginning phase, and then each person will take their main phase, their combat phase, their second main, and ending phase in order. Likely it's not going to become a real card, but I find that it would be a very interesting card. Glade of Pump spells. So you have to pay 2 and a green to play this land as you land drop. So it's a land that actually costs something. When it enters the battlefield, up to 1 target creature gets +2/+2 and gains trample. So you essentially are paying for the spell, but then it sticks around as a land later on. Where What, so this is Daybound, and as Where What enters the battlefield, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard or hand. If you do, that card becomes this creature's back face, and that back face has Nightbound. So it's like it's a dual face card that's not dual face innately. It's a normal card that then when it becomes Nightbound, you flip it onto whatever card you exile. Very cool. So this one here is hard to read. I think it's clear, friend to maybe too many, but it's got familiar sounds. So it's a grouping of things called familiars. And familiars are bats, birds, cats, dragons, fairies, frogs, imps, lizards, spiders. I missed whatever that one is, foxes, and then any card that has familiar in its name. So it makes it so all your familiars have flash. So similar to how we had like outlaws, this is very similar to that with like familiars instead. And then it makes you gain mana, and then each opponent loses life based on however many familiars you've got. Mages of the Chains here makes it so if a player would draw a card, except for the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, they instead discard a card and then they can draw a card. That's not like a super unique thing. That one easily could come around. Search Elemental here. Whenever you search your library, scry 1. And then whenever you scry, put a +1/+1 onto it. The Colossal Dreadmaw, you may cast creature cards from your hand as long as they are the card Colossal Dreadmaw. Interesting. Oh, as though they were the card, Colossal Dreadmaw, and then they become Colossal Dreadmaws. So it's like turns everything into Colossal Dreadmaws. Pinchy McSting Butt here makes it so that whenever you deal combat damage, conjure a card named Death of 1,000 Stings, Lethal Sting, or Stinging Shot at random into your hand and reveal it. So conjured cards are essentially something from Arena from memory. They're like kind of like how Garth One Eye creates things, except instead of being limited to just being on the battlefield, they can go into your hand or your library and stuff. TLDR, exile target creature if it has any abilities other than keywords. So that's like we've had similar cards to that before. I think in Unfinity sets, like there was one that like removes all the text after some line or something. Each creature assigns combat damage equal to its mana value other than its power is very interesting over here for Narod. Toddler's Rage. Tantrum is a new ability here. It's like Trample, but for blocking. So assumedly, if you block something and you've got higher damage, then you deal damage directly to their face from that too. Jewelist Convocation. That one's essentially just a meme kind of one where you choose to 10-digit number at random, and then when you play a land or cast a spell, if it shares a mana value with one of the digits, you get to cross it out, draw a card, and then if you cross out all of them, you win. I doubt we'll see that one in a real set, but it could be pretty interesting. Immerse Battlefield. So this is a realm. So this is a very interesting kind of enchantment. Essentially, it's a realm. It sits there, and then you can pay 1 and a red to host a target creature at that realm. Now, assumedly, you can only have a creature hosted at one certain realm, but it means that you can kind of like it's an enchantment that essentially is kind of like an aura on each of the creatures that you've enchanted it onto, but you could they could add like negative realms, or this one here's obviously a positive one here, but you can like slowly give it to creatures that you want to, or give a different choice of realms or something. There's lots of really interesting ways they could use that. Blurry Vision. When it enters, look at the top 2 cards of your library and put them back to back in the same sleeve with either one in the front, and then they become a modal card. Doubt that becomes real. Keeper of the Crown here. So this is, it has L as a mana cost, so it costs 2 and an L. It can be paid with 1 mana from a legendary source. So you need to obviously use a legendary to actually be able to play this, assumedly, but it also gives like a really powerful ability. So this one here is other legendaries get +1/+1 and indestructible. But you can use like the adventure here to create a legendary noble in it, like turn something into a legendary noble that you can tap for a mana dork. Cleave of Blow here with multi-cleave. I don't think multi-cleave is a real thing yet. But that would be very interesting. It's kind of like you can remove certain things like certain keywords, and you pay extra for it. So it's kind of like a modal spell that you slowly kind of can move to however you want it to be. Processing plant here, when it enters the battlefield tapped, and you may exile a card from a graveyard other an opponent owns from exile into that blah, 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 blah. Put a card an opponent owns from exile into that player's graveyard. If you do, you get to untap it and exile the top card of their library. So it's kind of like removing cards from exile from other people's. Very cool. Jessy Baller, when you cast it, create a 1/1 white athlete creature token, and it does have rebound. So rebound on a creature is pretty cool here. When you cast it, you exile it as it resolves, and then it comes back, and then you get the 1/1 on the first turn, and then the 2/3 on the second turn. A Girl and Her Dogs. I doubt this one becomes real either, but essentially making it so that you create creature tokens that then you have to name. Doubt it becomes real, but would be really cool. New Master of Arms. Prevent all combat damage will be dealt by blocking creatures that are tapped. And then you get to pay 1 and a white to tap a target creature that is blocking him. Very interesting. Knight of the Flying Merfolk. So this is a bedtime story. So it's a new type of saga. You don't put a lore counter on it as it enters. You instead put a lore counter on it at the beginning of your end phase rather than your main phase. Very, very interesting. So it's kind of like instead of it being at the start of your turn, you're getting your sagas, it's at the end of the turn. So there's lots of very interesting ways they could use this. Like, for example, this one here is put flying counters onto each tapped creature you control. That wouldn't really work unless it was after the rest of your stuff, or draw a card for each creature you control that dealt combat damage. Who's That Praetor? Another card that's creating tokens based off of other real cards. Snap Judgment. Obviously, this is a reference to Marvel Snap. Colec completed here. When you cast this spell, each opponent gets 2 poison counters. Then each opponent with more than 2 cards in their hand discards equal to the difference. It has Annihil Infect though. Annihil Infect. Whenever it attacks, defending player sacrifices a permanent for each poison counter they have. Very, very cool. Essentially a different way for them to write Annihilate X, where X is poison counters or whatever. Fludge Guardian. So this is a very interesting one as well, and I doubt it becomes real because of the fact that it puts cards into an opponent's deck. Now, the reason that I don't think this would become real or anything eventually is because of sleeves. Unless people start carrying extra sleeves, someone would just know when their gunk cards are going to be drawn or something, and could cause issues. But it is a very interesting card that could potentially be on Arena or something. The Tax Taker here. Whenever an opponent pays a tax from a spell or permanent you control, create a number of treasures equal to the amount they paid. So that's when they pay Mana Tithe, Esper Sentinel, Ghostly Prison, etc. Stuff that's making them have to pay extra to do something. Starting Town NPC. This gives each creature card in your hand an additional sorcery adventure. That's pay 1 and a green, and then you can gain 2 life. And then it gives each creature you can cast from exile additional +1/+1s. So that's a very interesting kind of giving all your cards additional powers in your hand. I love that idea. I love the idea of, making it so that you can play cards differently, like giving each card in your hand cycling or something. This is similar to the kind of giving it cycling, except it's giving it, gain 2 life instead. Dairy Cow. This is obviously a reference to Pro ZD. Again, doubt that becomes a real card. Heart of the Jewelist, reference to Yu-Gi-Oh! But I actually love this one, and I wish this was a real card. You can play cards from anywhere. Sorry, you can draw cards from anywhere in your library. So instead of drawing the card from the top of your library, you can draw, the 8th card, or, the 10th. You could draw the card from your bottom of your library. Lots of very interesting ways you could use this. Abit of the Sacred Meeple. I doubt this one becomes real because it's so far that I just don't understand it. I assume it's a reference to something. Someone tell me what that's a reference to, please. Wows of the Aspirational. This is a very interesting one because of the fact that it has, like, when it attacks, if you control an energy, blood, clue, food, map, power stone, treasure, other monarch, have the city's blessing, and the initiative, you win the game. So essentially having like heaps of different effects on it. It also is a snow creature because it costs snow here. So it costs all colors, colorless, and then snow to be able to play it. Very interesting, and I like that one. I find it very cool. You complete me. If your life total is greater than 10, it becomes 10 for the rest of the game. Your maximum life total is 10. Playing around with maximum life total, I think, is cool because it's something I don't think they've really explored too much. And then you also get an emblem, which is pay 2 life, add 1 mana, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So it's kind of like a big, I need to win very soon kind of thing, but my cards are close to kind of like, I need that kind of card draw eventually, maybe. Lich's Duel Mastery here. When it enters, exile the top 5 cards of your library face down as shields. If you lose life, instead put one of your shields into your hand instead. If you can't, sacrifice it. And then when it leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. I think this is a reference to Duel Masters, but I think that this would be a very interesting kind of card. I don't think it would entirely work within Magic currently, but it could be very interesting. Mox Poison, just a reference to Mox, the other Moxes, but, you know, getting 2 poisons. Ren and 1. So this is obviously, you know, Ren and etc. Nothing kind of super unique about this. It does give the Planeswalker the ability to tap, which is pretty cool though. Indicate, free mana, target permanent, it does nothing. This as well, I assume is a reference to something that I just don't understand, but it is a very interesting card. Pyromancy 101 with Teach. So pay 1 and a red, and then you exile this spell taught to a creature. So it's essentially very similar to Cypher, but instead of being on when you deal combat damage, instead it's you can tap it to copy the exile card. So kind of there's some really interesting things you could potentially pull off with this, as well as there could be an ability to kind of like teach different cards to things even if they don't have teach. There's lots of really cool ways you could pull that off. Defender of the Queue has positioning, so when it enters, you lock your creatures in order from left to right as long as you control a creature with positioning, and then each time a creature enters, you can either put it to the left or the right of another creature you control, so you can kind of not rearrange your board is locked into how it is, but it's because of the fact that it gives adjacent creatures to it buffs. Avacyn's Collar here. Equipped creature can't attack, block, transform, and its activated abilities can't be activated. And it's got Shackle, which is pay 3 to attach it to a target creature you don't control. There was something similar to that. I think it's Bloodthirsty Blade, right? Bloodthirsty Blade is very similar to this, except for the fact that it doesn't have like a keyword attached to it. So having the keyword attached to it is pretty cool. That's essentially the same as Bloodthirsty Blade, except it's got a keyword for it. Elber. So this is a world enchantment that's a planet. So this is a very interesting mechanic that we could see within the planet, the space opera set as well. So when you play it, you exile 5 cards of your library as its resources. Then at the beginning of your main phase, you either choose to discard a card, and if you do, you can put 2 of the resources into your hand, so you're getting like 2 cards essentially, right? Or you could exile the top card of your library as a resource. So you can kind of like stack it back up if you've drawn all the cards within it, or you can discard a card to draw the cards from it. I love this idea. I think this is a very cool mechanic, and I could easily see this becoming a real thing. Plant a sapling. So this is double face. So on one side, it's a sorcery with green. Search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle this spell into its owner's hand. So you will shuffle, plant a sapling into your hand. but into your library, but transformed. So on the other side, once it's transformed, then it is like gets power equal to the lands you control. So it's like the second time you play this card, do this instead. Very cool. So Tufa, Keeper of the Full Grip. Whenever a spell you control causes you to gain card advantage, each opponent loses 2 card life. So card advantage is anytime you each time a spell you control resolves and you end up having more cards relative to your opponent than before that spell resolved. Divination, so card draw and board wipes and stuff like that will all end up potentially being card advantage. And tokens are not cards, so like if you've got a whole bunch of tokens out, you're fine. Anax and Semed and Kainos and Tiro. So it's got First Strike and Vigilance, and then whenever you cast a spell that targets them, draw a card. Each player may put a card from your hand. Each player may put a land card from the hand onto the battlefield, and then each opponent who didn't draw a card. That's a simple card. Could easily be a real card, except it's got Heroic, and Heroic's not around as much now. They've got Valiant instead, so I don't know if they're going to keep Heroic or just keep it as Valiant. Who knows? This one here is obviously just the pun on there. So there is each exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. There is up to 3 target creatures can't block this turn, and there is target opponent. I just said there 3 times. Target opponents gain control of target creature you control. So it's kind of like, just a 3 formed kind of lesson, because a split card, you can choose 3 different modes for it. Fetching Garden. This is another very interesting kind of potential land cycle we could see. It enters tapped if it was played from your hand. So if you've got something that, is search for search for a forest and put that onto the battlefield, then it doesn't and not tapped. It doesn't enter tapped. If it's, play it from exile, play it from the graveyard. There's a whole bunch of different ways to not play lands from your hand. It enters untapped. So that would be a very interesting kind of thing we could see. Flavor Disaster. When it enters or is turned face up, target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is its power. It has Negamorph. So you can cast it. It's essentially got Morph, except when it's turned face up, put a -1/-1 counter on it. So if you play it for the Negamorph thing, then it's going to be cheaper to get it out, but it's going to have -1/-1 counters on it. Very cool. Questing Cosplayer here. When it enters, create a questing roll attached to it. If you control another roll on it, put it into the graveyard. Enchanted Creature has all the abilities of Questing Beast. So that's like an aura that turns something into a different creature, right? Now that, they encourage people to go look at Gatherer for different things, like the Offspring and stuff like that. Not necessarily Offspring, actually. More like the Tarmogoyf tokens and stuff. This could be a real thing. Temur Elevator, another kind of land cycle we could see. It has Ascend, and then if you have the City's Blessing, you lose 1. If you don't have the City's Blessing, you lose 1 life. So it's like a advantage for if you've got the City's Blessing. Boltfire has Flash Forward. You may cast it from exile for its Flash Forward cost. So essentially, if it ends up getting exiled, you can pay the Flash Forward cost to be able to play it, and then you put it at the bottom of your library. Brigand, who's seen some stuff, has Vigilance. Nimble is a new thing here, I think. Oh no, maybe Nimble's a real keyword. I think Nimble actually might be a real keyword. No, it's not. No. So Nimble here means it can't be blocked by creatures with 3 power or greater, which we've had essentially before. But then this here is Thought Weft. Thought Weft? I don't know how to pronounce that. It gives a creature with Thought Weft has all printed keywords of other creatures you control with Thought Weft. So essentially, it's a way to make everything into different kinds of slivers, right? So you can share all your keywords between your things. Subgoyf here, we can't really see this one, unfortunately. I think it's got something to do with artifacts and stuff, but I'm not entirely sure. Meander Tower Shell. When Enchanted Creature has Island Walk, and whenever this attacks, exile it and this aura. Return it to the battlefield under your control tapped and attacking at the beginning of your declare attacker's step. Then return the aura to the battlefield under its owner's control attached to that creature. So it's a way for auras to stay attached to things when they get exiled and come back. Very cool way. But that's it for today, guys. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I know this was a really, really long video, but what mechanics would you guys like to see from these kind of things? I love the kind of different lands that they had in there. That was probably one of my favorites. Like, I love this kind of double face, like you play it one and you get something, and then kind of like Approach for the Second Sun, except like on everything. But I think my favorite thing is the planets, right? The planets just look really, really cool and a very, very interesting mechanic. So let me know what you guys think. Have a great day and goodbye.